welcome to the podcast, Natalia.
Thank you.
So for listeners who haven't checked the show notes, who are you? What do you do?
It's always interesting, like, how do you define yourself?
Yeah.
So I'm a front-end engineer by profession. I am a part of Vue.js core team.
Mm-hmm.
I develop Vue documentation. So if our listeners ever read something about Vue, most likely it's something I've touched. And speaking about the work, I work at GitLab as principal engineer now. I don't have front-end in my title, but I have all the front-end background.
Yeah. So what does principal engineer mean in the GitLab situation? It's always curious here about, titles.
Yeah, titles are always fancy. And in terms of GitLab, principal means that you will work more with architectural level of problems than just hands-on with the code. So you will be working as a tech lead. In principal case, it will be like our tech lead for the stage. So multiple teams already leading stage-wide initiatives, writing architecture, helping people.
Yeah.
Most of my work is basically empowering others, delegating, developing some kind of proof of concepts, and then trying to involve other people into these concepts and bring the new knowledge again. And also sometimes invalidating concepts too, because it's your work. It sounds like, it's a principle with this like shiny lead wins all the time, and you're like completely right, and people just come to what is right, and sometimes you just don't know what is right, honestly. So invalidating the things you tried is also part of the job.
Yeah, important part as well.
Very much so.
Yeah. I think one of my favorites when it comes to titles is an acquaintance who works at an electric car company, and I think he was the first engineer at the company.
Oh.
And he may have changed it now, but for the longest time, his title on LinkedIn was just tech. Yeah, I like it. It's completely underselling his involvement. I think he should have been something like principal, going by your explanation. but it's fun with titles. Anyways, so you have one or multiple presentations here?
Just one.
Just one. Just.
I know people have multiple. So
Yeah. True in that sense. So you were talking about state management, not stage management.
Not state. It's just state management. And I still have a firm belief that state management is the most complicated part of front-end development. And it's because we either overuse it or underuse it. And because we want to put everything in this state and share it. And then you don't invalidate it. Or you just put too few things and you don't know how to deal with shared state. And on top of this, as a front-end, we always deal with API requests.
Yep.
And how to define what should be stored on front-end, how do you reflect your backend, how you basically keep this connection of reflecting your backend in a correct way without building a huge boilerplate of things. Because that's what we do normally.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating because that's actually one thing I've written down at first. Overthinking ? And then underthinking ?
Exactly. And this is always the case. So many things I've seen, so many state management tools. It's not about the tool, it's about the approach, the way you want to use the tool. And I think this very common mistake, especially for new front-end engineers, like put everything to this shared state. Use the form in this component.
Yeah.
This component is used once.
Yeah.
No, put the form state in the shared state.
Yeah.
Because we keep everything in the shared.
Yeah,
that's why it's shared. It's single source of truth.
Yeah, it's so nice and clean.
Oh yeah, it's so nice and clean, and then it keeps growing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's huge mass.
Open it. And when this table loads, the global state will contain another extra 2,000 objects.
And then you come to invalidation because we just fetch everything, put it in our precious state, and we never touch it.
Yeah.
Maybe backend changed like 10 times already, and you're still sitting there like, that's my data. Just never refresh the page.
I'm just waiting. I'm very patient.
And then you start implementing this like polling, which is another headache completely. But
and I attended your presentation yesterday. I really liked it, and you demonstrated, what was it, a Vue query?
Yeah,
right? Not jQuery.
Basically, it was basically React query. Yeah. Originally, the name of library was React query, which Again, I don't think it was a good management and marketing decision to name it React Query because you're narrowing to the framework.
Yeah.
And you want to make it framework agnostic. Right now it is framework agnostic because the core is something that doesn't work with framework.
Yeah.
There are wrappers for different ones. So yeah. So I'm not saying this is a silver bullet.
No.
By no means there are silver bullets in the world of state management.
No.
But this it's some new and interesting approach. I got really interested in Vue Query after I used Apollo client for some really long time, learning all pros and cons. Again, like a typical engineer, when I started with Apollo client and GraphQL's magic, oh my God, it just handles everything.
Yeah.
Loading states, error states, caching.
Yeah.
It's so nice, and also working with GraphQL. And then I realized it's too much magic in it. And explaining magic to your teammates is complicated too. Onboarding people is hard. Learning curve is extremely steep. Again, if you just use it for to do app,
it doesn't matter.
super cool. But if you go in some advanced things, well, some things just happen and you don't know why.
Yeah.
And also with REST API, I used to give a talk about this too, because in my more passionate phase about Apollo, you can use REST API, and you can, and we actually do use.
Yeah.
You can wrap it with the resolver, especially if it's temporary. Imagine you're migrating from REST to GraphQL. Some part is already in GraphQL, and you decide to use Apollo. You still have some kind of legacy endpoints. Yes, you can write a resolver. It will fetch data from REST API, wrap them in the proper shape to match your schema, and you can use them in your application. The amount of work. It's always about writing boilerplate.
Yeah. Of some kind.
So I was really curious when I saw React Query when it started, because it feels, even now it feels, it was inspired by Apollo. They use the same technology under the hood. They use observables. I really like this. They use observables. I've been a fan of RxJS. I still am, partly not using it, but I'm a fan. And seeing how they implement the power of observables with API requests is fascinating. And that's why finally people who work with other APIs have a tool to see the same kind of performance and cool features without that much magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from your presentation, it really seemed like it threaded a pretty nice line, making it feel pretty simple, but not that magical.
Yes.
Because I think I'm kind of a little bit allergic to whenever there seems to be too much magic going on. I don't know if it's good or bad, probably a bit of both, but it seemed like it had a nice balance, at least in the examples.
Yes, it does have a nice balance. It has a really nice fine-grained control over the cache and over the operation process. So whenever you fetch data, you have a bunch of settings to make it in the way you want it. And again, cache updates, nothing happens really automatically, especially if you update by ID comparing to Apollo. And that's a good and bad thing, right? Good because I'm not writing any code. Good because you have a nice control over what you're updating and which order and how it happens in your application. Yeah. Because sometimes Apollo updates things you don't want to take.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like such a classic thing. It works out really nicely until it suddenly doesn't, and you realize you have to do something completely different.
And you just need to fix it with how.
Yeah. This doesn't actually fit my use case at all. So what do I do now?
Yeah, that's right.
You mentioned something really fascinating when we were emailing about this, that you were refactoring some code base with multiple state management solutions.
Oh, yes. And it's still payment. So unfortunately, this doesn't involve Vue Query, but I did, and I'm doing it. And so GitLab as an application is very old. Well, very old in the development.
Oh, yes.
If we're speaking about 10 years old factories, it's new. If we're speaking about 10 years old code base,
it's a different thing.
So at GitLab, we started with Vue before the state management library for Vuex was even released. I wasn't in the company at this point. They developed their own state management solution, which was class-based state. So you create JavaScript classes, proper JavaScript classes, no fancy, but using them with Vue 2 adds so-called contagious reactivity, because anything you put in the data property in Vue 2 gets reactive, including classes.
Oh.
It's not the case for Vue 3. It's important, again,
okay.
But this classes became reactive, so whenever you change the property, you see the interface rendering.
Oh.
So yes, it was one of the solutions. Another one was Vuex, because you have the application, you have the store working, but there is Vuex now. So you can add Vuex on top of this and make them work together. I don't know who was the author of this genius idea, but I've seen application working like that. And then we bring GraphQL to the picture. and we bring Apollo together with it.
Oh,
And again, when we brought it, I remember that not everyone in the team was on board with using Apollo as state management tool, which is completely normal, right? It's something new, something.
yeah.
But they decided to use it in some teams as a GraphQL client, just a client, not state,
Yeah.
not caching.
Yeah.
Again, taking a huge library and using it as a client is interesting.
Yeah.
So what they did, they put Apollo into Vuex to make calls to GraphQL API.
Right.
Yeah, you could use fetch, but
Yeah.
you decided to go with Apollo query.
Yeah, it was there.
And now we have this beautiful abomination
Yeah.
where
Good.
everything like fetches data and works in some way with 3 different state management tools that try to communicate with each other and produce all kinds of fascinating bugs.
I bet.
You can only imagine
Yeah.
how it works. And like trying to untangle this crazy mix was really interesting experience.
Yeah.
That's the moment I wish we used some kind of view query because it was literally all the state wasn't a client state. Like no property in all this mix is purely client property. And all of it was fetched from API at some point. We have a combination of things. So I'll give it this Ruby on Rails application. And when it was just created, it was just proper Rails page, right?
Yep.
Rendered. And if there was any kind of interaction, page reload.
Yep.
Here is your
Nice and simple.
Yes. And then we started building view layer on top of this. Maybe not the best performance, but it was the way to add interactivity.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere.
So now we have data coming from 2 places. One is data attributes of the element where you mount your view application. So there is Rails render page, you have some kind of a div or span or whatever with like data, project path, data, group ID, data, something else. So you don't fetch them from the API, you take them from Rails templates. And then you fetch data from the API, you mix it, and you have the result in your cache. But it's still all the data come from the backend, checked in 2 different ways.
Yeah.
And none of the properties is client.
Yeah.
And I'm like sitting looking at this. I just wish we could have some tool that just caches everything for us. And then we decide what to do with the cache.
Yeah, exactly. Push it over there, gather it up.
Yeah, instead of trying to find out what is stored in which particular state at some given moment of time, because there are also real-time dates on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting because when you first mentioned it, sounded like such. How could it even happen? But even now, when you've just been describing it a bit, I'm starting to see how easy you can end up there, because we have an oldish React application with before Redux and stuff like that was a thing. So it has its own homegrown thing, which looks like Redux if you squint and stuff like that. And of course, if we were going to start improving stuff, it would be pretty natural to start with some component and use a modern state solution.
Right.
And then we're there, halfway there. It doesn't take much.
It's always about the evolution, and I understand. It's like I don't put any blame on the developers who did this because it's easy to judge, right?
Yeah.
How could you do this?
Yeah.
But maybe they had like pressure and deadline.
Yeah, of course.
And they just needed to get this thing implemented like yesterday.
Yeah.
And you should go the fastest way you can.
Yeah.
And think, okay, I will just refactor it. I will create a follow-up issue. And then 5 years later, it's still open. And again, no pressure because maybe you were not given the time for a factory.
Yeah, of course.
It's just interesting because when you think about big companies, big names, like they always have this little idea, like probably they know how to do things right.
Yeah.
If I think about GitLab before joining it, GitHub, I don't know, Amazon, Spotify, whatever, you're like, yeah, they're doing a pretty good job. Netflix.
Yeah, they have it figured out. Surely.
Literally, probably it's a very obvious statement, but I just want to say it aloud.
Yeah.
None of the companies has this silver bullet solution.
Yeah.
Because if they did have, probably we would know about it.
Yeah.
We would probably just taken it from them. And we all have some nice, interesting discoveries we bring. If I remember correctly, when Netflix was developed, RxJS was born as a tool. So it was brought by Netflix employees at this point, by and large. But it doesn't mean that we have a solution for everything.
No.
It doesn't, by no means the code base is perfect.
No.
I can say it pretty openly because our code base is open source. Everyone can go and see, and like something is nice, then it's not.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
Exactly.
That's what you get when you actually deliver something every now and then. It is what it is.
Yes, and it's constantly growing and changing too.
Yeah, but I wonder about, do you think there are like better ways or of thinking about state management? I listen to too many Apple podcasts. I hear them talking about stage management. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, so it's hopeless. I'm sorry.
The thing is, I believe that we are still in the process of evolution and finding the better ways. Because even the Redux, when it was a huge improvement for what we have, right? And then every single step we took after that is improvement.
Yeah.
But we're far from final still, I believe. So now it's an exploration after Apollo brought the idea of like caching data, having them here, and also access to this data is closer to components. Right now, you don't have so many intermediate steps to get the data from the cache, basically querying and have it exactly there. So it was a nice step, and now there is an exploration that started in this direction.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's like it's right or it's final. I believe that there will be so many steps taken to bring us to some consensus of good state management. And again, no tool is universal.
No.
I like to remind this about people. There is a joke about how to be a senior engineer. Yeah. Like on any question, just respond with "it depends."
Yeah.
Well, it depends.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because it's completely true.
But you also respond with "it depends" because it's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it is, what is the best state management tool for us? Oh well, it depends on you. But what is the best approach to our organizational structure?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder if it's a bad thing to have that reflex of pulling in a popular library. I don't know. I don't have any data on how many people try writing their own like particular solution first. But I mean, if anything, I imagine that our state management in the apps that I'm familiar with would become simpler if we were to rewrite them later. And I would imagine that goes for something where you started with a library as well. But it's hard to know. I mean, at the same time, you probably save a lot of time in the beginning by using a library, especially if you're familiar with it.
Yes, exactly. And there's always a trade-off, like bringing a new tool or just skipping a new tool and looking what's going on there. What I would say in this particular case is, if it is something new, feel free to experiment around it. It's about bringing you to your exact product, but just try to play around and see if it's worth or not. We sometimes have pet products, right? Pet projects or something. It's a nice little sandbox to play. Build something like beyond the to-do app.
Yeah.
Try to build something and use the tool. That's what I normally do. Just go into some edge cases, try to make it more complicated, and see if it serves the purpose, at least. Yeah. Without hands-on experience, it's always hard to tell. And maybe even after this, it's not worthy back to your main thing.
Maybe.
Which is completely fine.
Maybe we should just push all the data back to the server again. That's the thing.
I cannot say it's wrong.
No, it's not.
Because there is a trend also about SPA was a wrong move.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's always a pendulum, isn't it?
It is. But I think this is what makes front-end really fascinating.
Yeah. I was talking with someone else before about that. Front-end, it's either really appealing to you or it's kind of off-putting because there's so much going on.
It's very chaotic.
Yeah, exactly.
Like so many tools, so many things, so many use happening. It's not boring.
No, it never gets bored. So have you managed to decrease the number of statements?
Yes, actually, it was a huge spike merge request. Important one, because when you work at GitLab, you learn pull request called merge request.
And we actually used GitLab at work a couple of years, but I still like merge request better than pull request.
It makes more sense.
Yeah, I think so as well.
I request my changes to be merged, right?
It feels very straightforward.
What's pull? I request changes to be pulled.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
I have a rope here. Could you grab it for me?
Yes, exactly. So, back then, I created a huge spike merge request, thousands of changes to just play around, eliminate. No tests, of course, in the MR. It's never intended to be merged because it's just spike work. Yeah. But in this MR, we reduced it all to Apollo. So much code thrown out the window. And it works. Yeah. I mean, feature tests are passing, which means okay. No unit test it. And now we're splitting it into little chunks and digestible ones and merging it step by step like it should be. And it was crazy. It's like you can see how much of unnecessary complexity just grows from this set of tools.
Yeah.
people just need to jump through hoops to implement the change.
Yeah.
And nobody had got time for proper refactoring. So
No.
just add things on top of this. And it reminds me of this game, which is, then I can't remember the proper name of, when you have this like tower of wooden sticks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, is it like isn't it called the Tower of Hanoi or something?
Or something, yeah. And you just slowly pulling them one by one.
Oh, that's one. No,
It's like
Jenga.
Jenga.
Yeah.
And probably I was the person who just pulled.
Congratulations.
But I'm happy it did.
Yeah.
At some point, because now it's much simpler and transparent application where you can actually read the code and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, for now.
Yes. Fast forward.
By no means I'm like 10x developer making a perfect product. No. It will probably evolve to another kind of abomination over time, but for now, at least for now, it's relatively clean.
Yeah. So if you look at the kinds of state management you're doing today, do you have any like pet peeves about it? Stuff that you would like think there has to be a better solution for this?
Oh yes. It's like, again, every single time I'm working now with Redux-like libraries, Vuex including, like every single time I see a mutation called request X entity, receive entity success, receive entity error, and just like face bombing. It's so much unnecessary things. Just use a follow of your query or whatever. Just stop writing this loading true, error, false. We have a result now, error. Okay, we have an error. It's so annoying to read even. This is something. I'm still liking Apollo. I mean, now when I work with it, I also have a bunch of things that have questions, right? It's like, why did you go this way with the library? Which is normal, I believe.
Yeah, of course.
I think the most dangerous thing you can hear from engineer about the library is like, it has no downsides.
No, it means you haven't used it, right?
Yes. You never try to use it extensively.
Yeah.
If it has no downsides, like, you should be a fanboy. You never tried it in real life.
Yep.
Yeah, it does have downsides, but at this point, I think we kind of figured out how to work with it as a team.
Yeah, that matters a lot.
That's the most important.
Yeah.
It's not like you beat an expert. And I can, like, my main indicator is when we started working with Apollo front-end team, I had daily pings. Like, hey, my cache is not updating the way what do I do? And it's not working. My test is not working. Like, this is not, we have this error on the page and we have no idea how to debug it because Apollo doesn't give you a good error messages. They're very cryptic.
That's no fun.
It's like, uncaught error, whatever.
Yeah.
This is not a function.
Yeah.
Go figure out what it was.
Thank you.
And over time, we added lots of things to documentation. This is company policy, but I really like it personally because I write documentation for the open source. If there's the same question asked over time, probably it's worth it to be added to the docs. So you could point people there instead of just responding every single time. And now it's like, it went down a lot in terms of requests and everything. So right now, I rarely get pinged about it. So this means two things I'm really happy about. First, people learned how to use it. And also, I was trying to grow a few in-house GraphQL experts to stop being a bottleneck in this process. And it's interesting again because some people enjoy being a bottleneck.
Yeah.
It makes person feel important.
Yeah.
And irreplaceable.
Yeah, I can help with this. I'm useful.
I'm basically being here because I'm very important. If I leave, the company will crumble.
Yeah.
And it's rather a little evolutionary stage we go through than just personal traits. It's like when you grow as an engineer, you go to this point. Okay, I'm cool. I'm irreplaceable. Yeah. Amazing. And then you realize how detrimental it is for the company and for your own.
Yeah, exactly. So suddenly someone calls me and I'm the only one who can solve it. I don't want that.
You go on vacation like chicken Slack daily. What if something happens?
Yeah, exactly.
I got my moment of realizing this. I was on vacation and I reached for Slack, which is already bad. Don't reach the Slack if you're on vacation. Don't do this. Yes. Work-life balance is And I saw that there was a thread on front-end channel about something Apollo, and someone just said on this thread, let's just wait till Natalia is back from vacation. Like, it was really bad feeling. Oh my God. Like, I just basically prevented people from growing in this direction, answering all the questions myself. And also I became this irreplaceable engineer. And it's at this point I was like, no. Let's just get a group of people, onboard them, and they will be answering questions instead of me.
Yeah.
and I will be just helping them if they don't find an answer.
Yeah.
And when people got to figure out this themselves, they grow super fast.
Yeah.
Because you stop being this patronizing teacher. Like, okay, I know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, from the other side as well, it's like, yeah, she's the only one who really understands this stuff. I've never been able to grasp it myself. It's
exactly. People just start taking it like, yeah, this is some sacred knowledge that she possesses, and it's bad. It's maybe good for one's ego at some point of time.
Possibly.
But in the end, actually, when you grow through this process, you also become a better engineer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you get more space to do more things.
Yes, exactly. And you start seeing the success in others when they do the same thing, and sometimes they do it better than you do.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see when you start mentoring someone and then they come up with a solution you would never come up with.
Yeah. See it in a different way.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the best feelings, I think, in career.
Yeah, but it takes work.
Yes. Yes, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. You just cannot jump to this stage.
No, and you really need to get the rest of an organization with you as well. I mean, you have to get people to step in as well. That's.
I think we have really good engineers. I love our front-end team in particular. It's just very enthusiastic team. Not only doing their jobs, but coming with the ideas, wild ideas sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to also invalidate collectively the idea. We have an RFC process as a front end, like proper open source library.
So how much time do you spend on Vue docs and stuff like that?
Depends. This varies. So, for example, when we were releasing version 3 and we need to update the docs, it could be up to 6 hours a day writing Vue documentation because you need to update it in plenty of time.
Yeah.
Right now, I would say around maybe 4 to 5 hours a week, sometimes less. Mostly reviewing and writing little updates to Vue docs. Or managing to see what we just shipped with a minor release and bringing it to the documentation. But it's much, much less work comparing to the moment of release. But in release, it's spike for everyone.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of similar to game development, I think. In game industry, there is no
deadline. Yeah.
Everyone is working super hard and we can relax for some time.
Yeah. So how many people are involved in the docs writing?
In docs team right now, we have formally 4 people involved, but practically 2 of them are contributing much less right now, dealing with normal life circumstances. Again, no blame here. Yeah. We all have things in our own lives, so 2 people are contributing actively to the docs.
Is it the right size team or should it be larger?
I think right now with the current load, it's good, and also we have so many community contributions.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, people love to contribute to docs. It's a bit tricky because there is common misconception that contributing to docs is easy.
Yeah.
Because you just write into docs. And it takes time to explain it, to write the docs for the tool, for the technical tool. You need to also understand the tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Know the source code because you're going to work with it, but also be able to explain things, how it works in a nice way that people can read and understand. So just writing it. I got this. I can just contribute into docs once.
I mean, that actually makes it significantly easier to contribute to the code because you don't need to understand the same width to make a contribution.
And it's it's not like if you're working on docs, you never touch the source. On the opposite, when you work with docs and you realize that something is super hard to explain, most likely this API needs to change. If you try several times and it's still complicated, you just you cannot explain to people why it works this way. Then you reach back to the source code and it could be improved. And you make this little improvement yourself, or you ping other guys from the source code. Hey, can we just discuss this, please? Because it doesn't feel right. And we make the change. So contributing to docs basically widens your perspective a lot. And it's a nice process. And with developing docs, there are also stages, developing a code. For example, when I write the code, I don't think I do the perfect code from the start. Nobody does. First, you just write very raw logic, right? Creating a bunch of constants, no abstractions, repeating yourself 5 times, pasting instead one huge method. Okay, this function just does everything, literally everything in the world.
Yep.
And then, this works. Now we can start Splitting it down, we can abstract this to utility. This can be done.
Yeah.
I don't need this many constants. We can just simplify that. Okay, this will be reduced and everything. And you go through these little iterations of improvement. Same goes with docs.
Yeah.
First, you write a draft that's really bad. You want to put things on the paper.
Yep.
And then you start reading and improving. And here, very similar with the code, you need to know where to start.
Yeah.
Where and when. Because you can be a perfectionist and this code is still not good enough for shipping. Same with docs. You need to know what's good enough. It's never perfect.
Nope.
And there will be improvements from community. That's also the idea of it. Because the community will polish it to the perfect state. There are thousands of people reading documentation. And if it's wrong somehow, someone will notice and contribute. Same with the code. Define, okay, this is good enough to be shipped.
So you get a lot of feedback and
of course.
Yeah.
Of course, sometimes it's related, sometimes it's unrelated. The thing that every single open source maintainer needs to deal with is like sometimes people are just strange.
Oh yeah.
And you still need to be polite with them.
Yeah. It's a big job.
You just like sometimes people just come and ask for support. Basically, I have this problem, like Stack Overflow on your docs.
Yeah.
This problem. Could you please tell me how to deal with it? And I point them in the right direction. Sometimes people just being straight rude. But your documentation sucks.
Yeah. Fair
It's
enough.
like, okay,
Yeah.
probably you had a bad day.
Yeah.
Dude. But thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for your feedback. Sometimes people expect that you will solve their problem immediately. Also, I think a big problem for open source in general, that people start taking your effort for granted.
Yeah.
They file some reasonable issue, for example, and they're right.
Yeah.
They're right that the issue exists.
Yep.
And I get it. It's super important for them to get it fixed. Maybe less for docs, more for libraries.
Yeah.
And then 5 days passes and they write something like, oh my God, it has been 5 days. From Vue team, I would expect more professionalism in responding to community requests. And it's very tempting to say, hey, we're not paid, okay?
No.
We're not like your help desk. But you respond with, hey, we know that this is very important. We don't have a bandwidth to take it just now.
No.
Please be patient and we will definitely address your issue.
Yeah. I follow the creator of Curl on Twitter, and he gets a lot of strange.
Oh my God.
stuff.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, there's like people find the copyright notice and email address in like the license agreement for their car infotainment system, and then they email him for support on the car and stuff like that.
I can only imagine this.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's many strange levels to people.
That's right.
Everyone has a bad day sometimes. Yes. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else you want to mention? Or
Well, I don't know, but in general, probably as a person that works in open source and works on another open source in her free time, I would probably just add that sometimes if you want the change to be made, if you use the tool, it doesn't mean GitLab, Vue.js, something else. And I got this also at this conference, speaking with attendees. Sometimes people are super unhappy about something, but they never try to reach out. Like, yeah, we would like to have this feature. And you normally say, have you filed the feature request? And they're like, but it's useless, but you didn't try. Maybe it's not that useless. So if you want the change in something, probably open source, please don't hesitate to create an issue. Like, what the worst could be? It will be closed. So what? You just back to the state you were.
Yeah, you haven't lost anything.
Before you filed an issue.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. They closed. Maybe you lost like 10 minutes. Okay. Maybe this was a bit harsh. Maybe you lost an hour building a proper reproduction. Maybe it's a bit annoying, but at least you tried.
Yeah.
And more likely than not, if the request is reasonable, you will get a response and maybe the thing will be fixed. So please don't hesitate to contribute, because describing the problem in any open source product is also a contribution.
Yeah, of course. People
forget about this too. Like, contribution is pull request. It's basically my code merge. No. Like, proper issue where you build a reproduction somewhere, sandbox, and explain is huge contribution.
Yeah.
This problem needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Yes. It's incredibly valuable. Agree. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was really interesting.
Tusen tack för att du lyssnar på Kodsnack. Vill du stödja oss? Tipsa en bekant om podden eller lämna en recension i till exempel iTunes. Du kan också köpa prylar med Kodsnacktryck eller stödja oss med en kaffe på coffee.com. Alla länkar och alla avsnitt finns på kodsnack.se.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.